Hello, Mindset Recovery friends. This is Roberto. Haven't made a video on recovery recently. I just wanted to give everybody an update. So, if nobody, I really don't have any followers, but if anybody's seen any of my videos, they know that I'm recovering from addiction to drugs and alcohol, sexual addiction, food addiction, myself, my ways of thinking, and lots of other stuff. Currently struggling with pride and outbursts of anger, intolerance of people that won't do what I want them to do, which is typical of addict behavior, alcoholics and addicts, which alcoholics are addicts, in my opinion. But the good news is that we do recover. And so this video is on the ways that I've found recovery and that my life has become more manageable because I've turned my will and my life over to my higher power, which for me is the God of the Bible. And so, anyway, currently, so I'm not going to go through all the things, but I found about 3 years of abstinence through recovery with the 12 steps, involvement in AA, NA, and Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christ-centered recovery program that I go to at my church, and been in leadership, working the 12 steps, which for anybody that's in 12-step recovery, a lot of people don't realize that the program is the 12 steps, and that the 12 steps, if you look at step 12, it's we had I'm going to put my shirt on there because I think it's badass. We had as a result of working the 12 steps, we had a spiritual experience. So the 12 steps are designed, if they are utilized properly, you get a sponsor that can help you work them because, obviously when you get to 12-step recovery, my life, I had burned it to the ground pretty much, almost killed myself, been miserable for 35 years trying to stop on my own. But working the 12 steps is supposed to lead you to a spiritual awakening, which is a conscious contact with a power greater than yourself. Like I said, mine is the God of the Bible. People can have any in AA and NA. It says the God of your understanding. So, a lot of Christians balk at that because they think that, you can have a higher power, whatever God you want. But what I've found in recovery is that's not really the case for me and for many people that have been in recovery for a long time and found relief from the spiritual malady, which is what AA and NA refer to. It's a spiritual disease. Um, the only way you can find relief from it is a new way to live, which is a spiritual way to live, practicing the principles that those programs teach. You learn those principles through the 12 steps. You do inventory that helps you identify patterns of behavior and identify what wrong thinking led you to false beliefs that caused you to practice those wrong behaviors. You learn about yourself, you learn about your assets, and they call character defects. Those are the things that are making your life unmanageable. And then you pray in the sixth step, you become willing to have God remove all those defects of character, which, I believe that the disease of addiction is sin. Whatever the enemy can use to take us out, he's going to use. And basically, whatever we do that we're not supposed to be doing, I believe we give the enemy permission to mess with us, and that he will use those things throughout the rest of our life to tempt us into making bad decisions because it's an effective strategy. And, I've fallen prey to it lots of times. But anyway, so I'm not recommending that someone that's recovering from addiction go back to using because, normally that is a very bad plan. I achieved about 3 years of recovery abstinence. And then I decided that I could drink moderately um, last year at the end of August. I have been successful in that endeavor. I have some self control now. I know that when I become drunk, that all bets are off, and I go back to old behaviors. So I don't do that anymore. I have been drinking moderately once every week or 2 weeks on payday, which is Friday. I'll consume 2 to 3 alcoholic beverages. I have adjusted that. I wanted to do one, then I was drinking two, then I started drinking three, then I went up to four. And then at four, I realized that, that was a bad plan. So then I titrated myself down from four to three. Sometimes I drink two, sometimes I drink three. But anyway, I don't feel like this behavior is negatively impacting me. It's not making my life unmanageable. But what's happened is, if you're not familiar with Celebrate Recovery, like I said, it's a Christian recovery program. It's based on the 12 steps of AA. It has biblical comparisons that talk about what they believe that that's where the steps came from, the Beatitudes of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. They definitely relate very well to it. There's a book that you can read on it that opens it up even more if you're interested. It's called Breathing Underwater. It's by Richard Rohr. His last name is spelled Rohr. He compares the 12 steps to Christianity, and they definitely, they go hand in hand. AA and NA say that they are God-given programs. I believe that to be true. I find that, a lot of people who are struggling with substances, they've tried lots of stuff, maybe including religion and church, and they haven't been successful for them. Maybe they have a bad taste in their mouth because of, the God of their understanding from their youth was maybe not a good guy, the way they were raised, experience that they had. When they think of God, they think of him as judgmental and angry at them and not accepting, and all he wants to do is put them in hell. Well, this is not a healthy view of God. So that is why the 12 steps in AA and NA, they suggest the God of your understanding, because, if your understanding is that God, he sounds like a tool and nobody really wants to listen to him. So they say you can choose your own higher power, which just has to be loving, caring, all powerful, able to help you stop the behavior of using, has your best interests in mind. And these are the attributes of the God of the Bible. He in the Old Testament, there's a lot of judgment and this type of stuff. That's not something, this is not a Bible study, but New Testament, is actually what I think Jesus said, that if you see him, you see the Father. And Jesus was loving and caring and forgiving. And so I believe that those are the attributes that God actually has. They were reintroduced. We're not under the law anymore when we're born again. We're under grace, which doesn't mean that we can do whatever we want, but it does mean that we have the Holy Spirit living in us, and he is changing us from the inside out. So anyway, I said all that to say, I'm in Celebrate Recovery now. We say that, our higher power is Jesus Christ. So it's not for everybody, but for people who do want to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, the 12 steps lead us to a conscious contact with our higher power. So that's, we get intuition. God can help us with our struggles. He can kind of, be kind of like a GPS and be like, yeah, don't do that. That's a bad idea. Or, yeah, I want you to do this. Jesus in not, I can't remember what sermon it was, but it probably was the Sermon on the Mount, where he talks about, the law says, adultery. So, if people who are strictly religious, like the Pharisees, the religious leaders of that time, they were like, well, hey, I don't break that law. I don't sleep around on my wife. And Jesus saying, he holds them to a higher standard. If you've even looked at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery with her. So when we're under the new covenant and we're born again and Jesus is changing us, those are the kinds of things. So I mean, he's not just going to tell you it's cool not to sleep around. He's going to be like, love your wife. The way you treat her. You need to respect her. Things of this nature. Maybe he's going to give you intuition to say some kind words, buy her some flowers, whatever. So that's love. Not committing adultery, that's just following a rule. But if you're staring at young women in the grocery store and lusting over them, or you're looking at porn or something like that, that's not pleasing. And so in Celebrate Recovery, we have 8 principles, and it's to make every change. One of them is to make every change that God wants to make in my life. So, people come to recovery usually because of 1 or 2 behaviors that are making their life unmanageable. They come at a problem solving level. Hey, if I could just quit smoking crack every day or drinking a fifth of Jack Daniels, boy, would my life be better. And, while that's true, that's not the ultimate goal that God has in our lives. He wants to conform us into the image of Christ. So I believe that continuously working the 12 steps, which is what AA and NA say, it's not one and done. I've worked the 12 steps and now I'm fixed. It's an ongoing thing, because sanctification is ongoing. So going back to what I was saying about just drinking moderately and having some self-control, I don't believe that that's negatively impacting my life. However, I've been a leader in Celebrate Recovery, and I have been doing cheering meetings and sharing with guys and giving experience, strength, and hope. And I was you don't run it. Leaders are but trusted servants. But I was doing a 12-step study with some guys from Celebrate Recovery, and honesty is the first principle that I learned. So even though the Bible doesn't say that drinking alcohol is a sin, only drunkenness. So I don't think that if you're using alcohol the way it was meant to be used, that you're sinning. But I did bring it to my attention. Not to my attention. I brought it to the recovery pastor's attention that I had been drinking moderately, on Fridays. Maybe sometimes every other Friday was really my goal on payday. And he was concerned about that. And so he thanked me for being honest, but he asked me to step down from my leadership role, because, when we're in a leadership role, we are supposed to be an example to others. And a lot of people in the recovery program at Celebrate Recovery, just like AA and NA, they might be in there for alcohol. They might be in there for drugs. They might be in there for porn. And if I'm telling them and they see that I have success, that I'm telling you it's okay for me to do that every other week or whatever, maybe they're going to think that, hey, I can just smoke crack or do meth or go to prostitutes or whatever they're struggling with. And so that's not a reality for most people. So what I've done, I talked about in some very early videos, the way that I stopped drinking in outpatient rehab. They put me on a drug called naltrexone. And what I learned from that is that, we think, and even AA said, because that was written in the 30s, that we drink because we like the effect of alcohol. And so when I was wanting to get some beer, it's because I wanted to catch a buzz in my mind. But what naltrexone does is it's an opioid receptor blocker in your brain. So they use it for opiates and stuff. So, but it also worked for alcohol, because all drugs release dopamine in your brain. And so it turns out that that is what your brain wants when it's craving alcohol or crack or porn or whatever. It wants that dopamine. So what they found out with naltrexone, and you can look up on this platform the Sinclair method, and it will explain to you. But that's when they first started using naltrexone. They realized that it would help with the cravings. So now the way it works is you don't take it and it takes away the cravings. It doesn't work unless you drink alcohol with naltrexone in your system. And what happens is, like I said, I thought that I was craving alcohol for the buzz, but you still catch a buzz when when you take naltrexone. But it stops the dopamine from going to the receptors in the brain. And so you get that buzz, which is what you think you're looking for, but it doesn't satisfy the dopamine craving. So what happens is over time, you reduce the amount of alcohol that you drink naturally. It's called pharmaceutical extinction. And so, even though I didn't feel like the way I've been using alcohol was bad or negatively impacting my life, that what was negatively impacting my life is that I feel like being involved in doing service and celebrate recovery is a ministry that I've been called to by God. And so if the fact that I was, maturely utilizing alcohol was going to impact my ability to help other people in the program, then, drinking alcohol is not a big deal to me. But I had gotten to the point where I got used to doing it again. And I just rationalized every time. It's like, this is not a big deal. I'm drinking in my home. I'm not getting drunk. I'm not, hungover the next day. I'm not, driving my car. And so, I agree with all that. But if I want to continue to be a leader in Celebrate Recovery, obviously, because I'm going to be honest and I don't want to pick up dirty chips and lie to people in the group because it's all about honesty, I need to find a way to remove the alcohol use from my life. And so I developed a craving again, even though I wasn't using it in a bad way. I wanted it because my using has always been about reward for me, and I deserve to do this. And I'm a grown man, and I can, if I'm doing it responsibly, it's fine. But anyway, I said all that to say I got some naltrexone, and I continued my ritual of drinking moderate amounts of alcohol only on Fridays. And so what's happened is the same thing that happened when I did it early on in my recovery. I've started to, drink less and less. And so with naltrexone, something that they say is don't drink through it. So, I know people who, they're used to drinking. Let's say one guy was drinking like a 12 pack to a case. And so he would take the naltrexone and then he would feel like he didn't need to drink anymore, but he would push through and drink anyway. And so then eventually what ends up happening in my experience with other people is that they just stop taking the naltrexone because they want to drink. Well, I'm not better than anybody else, but that's not the case for me. So, I drank and, I got myself 3 beers and I took my naltrexone. You got to take it an hour before you start consuming alcohol. They suggest you eat something. So I followed those directions and I drank 2 of my beers and then I opened the third one, took a couple sips and, I was like, I don't really want this beer. And it didn't make it taste bad or anything. It's just my brain was like, this is not doing for me what I want it to do. So I got up and poured my beer out and I didn't drink the third one. So that's the pharmaceutical extinction. Eventually you just won't care about it. And so I've decided to use naltrexone, uh, be compliant with the therapy the way it's supposed to be used, and just remove alcohol from my life, even though I don't think I'm sinning because I'm not practicing drunkenness. And I think that I deserve to be able to do that as an adult. But it's more important to me that I be able to be involved in leadership in Celebrate Recovery and help people who are struggling to try and get sober from a behavior. And so that's what I've decided to do. And it's working out well for me. So I had promised my son, he turns 21 soon. I had promised my son that I would take him out for a beer on his birthday. So, I'm planning on, I'm trying not to drink again until the end of June. I'm not struggling with it, but it's just it hasn't been that long since the last time I drank. And then my plan is to wait until his birthday, take naltrexone, take him out to the restaurant, get a good dinner, treat him for his birthday, and then at least an hour after the naltrexone is in my system, we'll belly up to the bar, and he can drink a beer because he's legal. He he's not an out. I don't think he got the alcoholic gene. I think, in my opinion, some people have a propensity to become an addict, and some people just his addiction is video games, in my opinion. But it's not negatively impacting his life. He's going to school. He's making money. He's 20 years old. He's getting ready to turn 21. He's responsible. He pays his bills. So, if he wants to drink a beer or two, and I'm there to be his designated driver, and I take my naltrexone, I drink a beer or two, and then I'm over it. Start drinking soda, non-alcoholic beer, water, whatever, and I plan on that being my last drinking, and picking up a chip and being technically sober again, so that I can get back involved in leadership, which the other leaders, you know, I have a gift for it. I'm not better than anybody else, but people have talents. I'm good at it. I've got a lot of experience leading groups in AA and NA for 35 years. I went to meetings. When I had periods of sobriety, I would chair meetings, and I'm very knowledgeable about recovery and the 12 steps. And so, I can share experience, strength, and hope that can be helpful to people. But if I'm not able to do that because of, drinking responsibly occasionally, then, what has to go? It's more important to me to help people than it is to have a couple beers on a Friday night. So anyway, that's all I really have to say about that. If you want information on 12-step programs, if you need like written resources, feel free to contact me. Please put mindset recovery or something of that nature in the email so that I'll know what it is. Because if you respond to this video, I probably won't see it. But if you send me an email, my email address is piaster67 at Hotmail, and that's PIASTER67 at hotmail.com. If I get correspondence from you, I will contact you. I will do what I can, share experience, strength, and hope, help you get set up with resources of places to go, where meetings are, whatever you need help with. I'm in all the way to recovery, and I keep what I have by giving it away. So I'm willing to share it. In the meantime, you know, keep fighting the good fight. This is Roberto signing off. Have a good day.